Let's move on to another company that we did see report after the bell yesterday, and that is moving in the opposite direction here. Nvidia getting a big pop in this session after reporting earnings per share of $1.04 on revenue of $6.5 billion. Some weakness in its crypto business, though, raising concerns potentially. Nvidia did forecast $6.8 billion in revenue for the current quarter, which was higher than the street expected. Let's bring in Vijay Rakesh, Mizuho Managing Director and Senior Tech Analyst. Vijay, it's good to talk to you today. Walk me through some of the headlines that stood out to you in this report. We're talking about crypto, but of course, Nvidia did see a lot of strength in their gaming as well as data center business.
Thanks for having me on. Yes, absolutely. I think Nvidia had a pretty strong quarter from the data center side, up about 16% sequentially. Gaming was strong as well. The weakness is obviously crypto came in light, but on the guide also, they guided crypto down to pretty minimal exposure in the October quarter. So, but even with that, they had a pretty strong guide. They guided above consensus. So there's definitely some concerns going into the quarter given the volatility on Ethereum and Bitcoin, and they definitely exceeded all expectations on the guide here. So you're seeing some reaction to that. I think Street was concerned going into the quarter. So some of that concerns coming off with the guide here. So, but definitely data center was a bright spot. Ampere on the GPU side was on the bright spot. Very long runway on that. They're only 5% penetrated in the PC gaming base there. So good runway there because the price generation is almost 50% of the adoption on the customer base in PCs. So.
Are there any numbers that investors can take away and say this is boding well for the tech industry, or that says something about future supply issues? Any big picture macro trends that you can extract from this report?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the data center side for them, it grew almost 35% year on year, even despite the pretty strong comps in first half of last year, where you had a big trend from work from home. So that continues to do well for them. I think when you look at their new next generation Ampere, which just started, might be like 3 quarters back, is only 5% penetrated of the entire gaming PC base there. So there's probably a nice runway on that ahead as well. So overall, I would say, looking out, good tailwinds for Nvidia. Obviously, there's some concerns around ARM, crypto, etc., but the core leadership in AI continues to be intact. So.
Let's talk specifically about that ARM deal. We did hear CEO Jensen Huang yesterday saying that the deal will unlikely be processed in this 18-month timeline that the company has laid out. We've seen the approval hit snags in China, in Europe. I mean, how much of that deal specifically has been priced into the stock? And if in fact, I don't know if we're at a point where we say the deal may potentially not go through, but if we're kind of at that point where investors start to get a little jittery around that, what kind of pullback do you think we could see in the stock?
Yeah, most definitely. I think the Nvidia management appears to believe that the deal is still on track. But as you've seen, multiple reports come out. The Eurozone is kind of revisiting that. UK is revisiting that. I think China, as you mentioned, is going to be an issue there. But I would say investor sentiment is definitely in the camp that this will be a major uphill task, will be a major uphill battle. So I think most investors believe that this deal probably will be tough to consummate. So, but again, on the headline that if it gets blocked, there'll probably be there'll be some pullback for sure, given that it was supposed to be part of a big runway going forward. But they still have access to the IP. They can still develop joint products. They can still develop a combined roadway, but they just won't have the asset in-house for sure. So.
Well, let me ask you, setting ARM aside for a second, we just had the Intel CEO come out and say that he's very much open to acquisitions. I'm wondering if NVIDIA might be thinking along the same way as we see the industry really consolidating. And if that's the case, what kind of targets would they be looking at?
Yeah, I think as you go into next year, 2022 and beyond, you probably see growth slowing globally. I think given that many of the large stimulus is behind you, and you had some pretty strong, hyper growth in many of the segments. So fair to assume that you could see some consolidation in the markets. The biggest issue, though, is antitrust and regulatory approvals. And so, especially for large cross-border M&A, I think the issue will be trying to get regulatory approvals, trying to get it through major, government M&A, government approvals, etc. So that would be the bigger issue. But you should expect some consolidation in the semi space over the next 1-2 years. So.
All right, Vijay, thank you for those comments, and we look forward to talking with you again. Vijay Rakesh, Mizuho, Managing Director and Senior Tech Analyst.